Hi, it's Mr. GreatStory with another AskReddit story. I hope you had time to enjoy the last video I posted because my friend, this one will definitely make you forget about time. Be sure to check it all the way through, because I left the best parts for the end. Subscribe for more. Lawyers of Reddit, what is a detail that your client failed to bring up to you that completely lost you the case? Lawyer in the UK. I acted for a member of a famous pedophile hunting group. My client was charged with various offenses relating to his vigilantism, most seriously, causing grievous bodily harm with intent. He wanted me to fight the case on a public interest defense point that is not available to him in statute or at common law contrary to my advice. I followed his instructions as I'm bound to do. If the state won't punish pedophiles properly, then it's left to men like my client to take the law into their own hands. A horseshit argument for a whole host of reasons. His laptop was seized by police and submitted for forensic examination. He had a staggeringly huge database of child pornography on it. He himself was a massive pedo. A friend of mine is a defense attorney. He was representing a guy with a lengthy record for assault. Basically, this guy took an account unit and threw it at his girlfriend. My buddy tells me he was able to get a plea deal for 1 year probation, no jail time. The judge is all ready to accept the deal when he asks the defendant if he had anything he would like to say. The defendant responds, "Yeah, I don't know why they charging me with assault. I never touched her. I just threw an account at her. This is bullshit." Judge rescinded plea deal because of the defendant's attitude/lack of remorse, went to trial, and got a year in jail. I'm a court-appointed attorney for qualifying individuals in family matters. Termination of parental rights case. I have been fighting to argue that the parent is stable, working lawfully, has a suitable apartment, doesn't need psychotropic meds anymore, ready to be a parent, etc. After a few months of negotiating with all the parties in the Department of Children Court Services, we have a pre-trial to try and convince guardians. I meet with my client before the hearing to see if anything changed. Nope, all good, let's get my kids. Great, that's not happening today, but let's try. We get going in court. My client, who is super hot-headed and quick to anger, gets riled up and goes off on the guardians, screaming in open court. It doesn't end there, but reveals 1. That no longer is working. 2. No longer in an apartment. 3. Doesn't want to have a relationship with guardians despite her kids loving them. 4. Won't send her kids pictures of the toys they miss and can't have. 5. Plans on moving out of state. 6. Think they can live as a family off of state aid when she gets them back and is 4 months pregnant. All in a matter of 15 seconds. I was too shocked to even react. Speechless. Not the image of stability and parental fitness I've been trying to paint since last July. Edit to clarify, the client was working really hard to get everything right and legitimately had everything going for her prior to this hearing. I was not making false representations or trying to get a monster reinstated. This was a true bombshell as I did my due diligence to make sure things were on the up and up and statutory requirements were met. Things fell apart very fast apparently. This was a very atypical situation. Parents typically do a really good job working hard to meet their requirements. Opposing counsel, isn't it true you hit victim in the face with a brick? Client, no. Marcus hit him with the brick. I hit him in the back with a piece of wood. He'd sent a photo of his wife's beaten face to his wife with a message saying something along the lines of "This, do you want this to happen again?" He came across very well in court up to that point, but his mask slipped when that came out. A buddy of mine case as a public defender. A gal was busted on drug charges and told him she didn't have any drugs on her when they arrested her. He thought, okay, we'll use that. Turns out, she didn't have any drugs on her when they arrested her because she just sold them to an undercover cop. Custody case. The client failed to tell me he was previously convicted of felony child abuse for breaking 16 bones in an infant's body. Minor traffic cases can be the worst for this, believe it or not, because they are short and simple and oftentimes the client isn't there. So if you get blindsided by something critical, there's often no chance to consult with them to turn things around. I had a simple speeding case, 70 miles per hour in a 55. No big deal. If she does a driving improvement course, they court will usually dismiss or reduce those since her driving record wasn't bad. When I showed up for her, I found out that she had been driving 70 up an unplowed snow lane to get around all the other cars traveling in the lane that had been plowed because they were driving too slow. I didn't know it was even possible to drive 70 on fresh snow. The officer stated he'd already cut her a break by not writing the ticket for reckless driving, and the judge politely agreed he didn't feel comfortable reducing it under those circumstances. When I called her up after court to confirm, she claimed she'd just forgotten to mention it. Now maybe I've lived too much of my life in the South, but that just boggles my mind as a detail you'd forget when hiring a lawyer for that incident. I would have told her in advance that hiring us was a waste of money, not to mention the hassle of taking an 8-hour class, and she should probably just go ahead and pay this one. I legitimately do that all the time during consults, give my honest assessment if the case is even worth doing, and so by omitting that detail she harmed herself for no reason. At least she took it well and didn't get defensive. That he filmed his offenses for his YouTube channel. The cops didn't even know. A witness brought it up on day 3 of a trial. It was a nice quick change of plea that afternoon. So you're saying it's just a prank, bro? Isn't a valid legal defense? Not since Prankster v. Bro in 1986. Case as a paralegal negligence case. The client argued that a lack of street lights and a cyclist he couldn't see was responsible for him hitting a wire pole. Upon discovery, the first respondent's report indicated that they found the driver in the driver's seat, pants down, with porn playing on the phone. It wasn't difficult to figure out who was negligent at that point. Your Honor, if the cable repairman had simply fixed the cable in accordance with professional standard practices, my client would have had no other recourse but to keep his ostrich in the corral on the evening in question. A guy in prison hired me to request a modification of his sentence because he was doing very well, completing a lot of optional programs, no rule violations, etc. He had his family come in and pay and everything to get started. I asked the family and the client if he had requested modification before, because the law said that for his conviction, he could only request modification twice for any one sentence, regardless of if they were granted or denied. Swore up and down he'd never filed before. You can see where this is going. After spending a few hours going over records and preparing documents, a copy of the CCS, the case record basically, finally arrived. He'd personally filed for modification 6 times, since he was sentenced with handwritten pleadings that were all denied. So the one he hired me for was a waste of time and would never be considered at all. Not my client, but the son of the opposing party, and presumably the party himself, lied about being blind to make himself seem more sympathetic as a witness. We didn't know either until he took the witness box. Their counsel asked him to take the oath, and he picked the card up and read it. That was the cherry on top of a series of ridiculous events. The judge dismissed the whole thing in our client's favor shortly after. I was a trainee at the time, but my boss, who was in her late 60s then, said it was the most ridiculous case she'd ever handled. I wasn't a lawyer in this role, but was a law clerk. This was a typical divorce case. This particular jury trial was about splitting assets and who would get what. It was a long drawn out case that took about 5 days. Right before the closing arguments, the attorneys wanted to talk to the judge. It seems as though a couple of days prior the couple decided to get back together, and instead of telling the judge and their lawyers, they just kept it a secret. We heard 4 days of evidence, arguments, brought in experts such as land assessors, financial planning people, and the like, and they were back together. One of the attorneys asked to be dismissed from the case immediately and walked out the courtroom. The judge had to dismiss the jury, and the couple was adamant that they didn't think that them getting back together was a detail any of their attorneys needed to know. Edit. Yes, in some states there are jury trials for divorces. However, this particular case wasn't for the divorce, but for a cause of action stemming from the divorce, marital property. It was a jury trial. I'm a public defender in an area with lots of meth use. Meth makes most people talk a lot. So I can't tell you how many clients forget to mention that they got to the jail still high and called their mom/girlfriend/buddy on the recorded jail phone, and not only confessed to the crime, but also brainstormed whatever alibi or version of events I'm relying on to defend them. Edit. I'm seeing this question a lot, so I'll add some info here. This is not legal advice. Just explaining things a bit more. Calls to a lawyer are privileged and generally go through dedicated lines that aren't recorded, depending on the facility. Calls to family, friends, etc. through the normal phones are not privileged, are generally recorded, and can be used in court. There are usually printed signs near the phones and a recorded warning before each call that this is the case. I was in court once for a school journalism project, and there was a woman in court who had been arrested for weed and crack possession when she came to bail out her boyfriend from a separate arrest. Apparently he called her from jail and told her to come to bail her out and to bring some weed and crack. The guard overheard him, and it was recorded on the jail phone, so they arrested her when she showed up. Continue to watch. The best is still to come. Credit card theft/fraud case. When I was a young lawyer back in the late 80s, I was trying this guy on a CC case and the witness was the department store clerk. Before video surveillance, the state relied heavily on witness identification. As she described the customer that was purchasing the very unique clothing her store sold, I asked her how could she be so sure it was my client. She looked at my client, who was wearing the most obnoxiously yellow shirt imaginable, and said, because not only does he completely match the description I just gave you, but he's wearing the exact same shirt I sold him. The jury convicted him, and I learned that day to better prepare my clients for trial. I'm actually a lawyer, but I was only watching this trial, not participating. So the case was that woman A had hit woman B in the head with a heavy beer pint at a bar, and woman B got pretty serious injuries. The defense claimed that woman A had not hit anyone with the pint, but instead had just thrown the pint into a random direction, and it happened to hit B in the head. Thus it was an accident, and not a battery. Well, the prosecution had a CCTV tape from the bar, and it was shown at the trial. And the tape clearly showed in HD as A walked behind B and smashed the pint to her head so hard that the pint shattered on impact. I looked at the defense lawyer and his jaw literally almost hit the table. The prosecutor also noticed this and asked something along thrown A. And the defense lawyer said that due to technical difficulties he couldn't get the CCTV tape open on his computer when he was reviewing the evidence. Woman A was found guilty. So yeah, I was completely dumbfounded. My father is a judge. I remember him talking about a case where a woman was suing for a severe back injury that she said was preventing her from working and taking care of her kids and so on. In the middle of the trial, a pen rolled off the table and she is bending over trying to reach it from her chair, but the pen was too far away, so she stands up and bends over and picks it up and goes back to her seat as if nothing is out of the ordinary. My dad is just looking at her and she snaps at my dad and goes, "What are you staring at?" My dad asked her if she was okay, and her response was that she was fine. Her attorney leaned over and said something to her, and she then loudly started complaining about her back and how much she back hurt, but no one believed her. Lol. This one ended my marriage. Well, it was the start of the end of the marriage. My husband lost his job in the title/mortgage business. Applied for unemployment, got denied. I decided to help him with his appeal hearing. I asked him multiple times before the hearing, "Is there anything you did that caused them to fire you?" He says, "No, absolutely not. They fired him out of nowhere." The hearing day comes. He testifies under oath that he did nothing wrong, was a good employee, no issues. Upon cross-examination, the other attorney pulls out documents from one of his real estate closings, documents he forged and backdated. Had to admit he perjured himself. Needless to say, he didn't get unemployment and he didn't sleep at home that night. Not me, but my mentor. This is the reason you never ask questions that you don't already know the answer to in court. During the trial with the judge on a divorce matter, the wife brought up that he had abused her during the course of their marriage. The client whispers to my mentor that that is absolutely not true. On the stand, during his portion of testimony, my mentor asks, "At any point in the marriage, did you lay your hands on your wife?" One time we were having an argument, and I held her down on the couch until she stopped arguing with me. What? My mentor said it was like she could see it happening in slow motion and all the alarm bells were going off in her head because he had never mentioned this, and, apparently, to him, this was not abuse. The judge gave the wife a lot more money as a result and the husband was baffled. My mentor was fuming. Eater, the husband admitted this was the only time he had laid hands on the wife. My mentor was more peeved because she had thought the case was in the bag, since wife had abandoned the kids with husband to run off with her lover down in Florida and literally only came back to the state to get the divorce done. The husband had been noted as being a great dad to the kids and a good figure in the community, hence why she was so damn shocked at his answer. I'm still a law student and this happened during my first internship at a court. A girl among other people was charged with drug possession, but because she had thrown away the drugs and the police couldn't prove that she bought or owned the drugs, it could have been one of the other people as well who still had drugs on them. The judge ruled in dubio pro reo. He then asked if she wants to add something, and this girl asked if she can get her drugs back. The defense attorney looked like he was about to get a heart attack. Edit. For those wondering, I know what in dubio pro reo means, but I wasn't sure if they use the term in other countries and tried to explain it if not. This happened in Germany. Employment law matter. He claimed to have been unfairly dismissed over bogus performance management. The real reason, he organized via Craigslist to have someone collect a box of his cum from a children's playground. There were explicit messages from him asking what they did with it and whether they rubbed it all over themselves. The employer provided us the messages. Edit. He was doing this on company time. The client in family law matter lied to me about using meth. Then used meth with the child in the room and the ex got footage of it on the nanny cam and then made excuses about why they couldn't do a drug test, then blamed me when they lost custody, despite the fact that they didn't show up to appointments or return my calls, so I couldn't prepare any court material. I dumped the client after that and left family law. I was actually on a jury. The guy was suing a business, said he got injured, couldn't work for 3 years. Defense counsel: sir, isn't it true that you spent 18 of those months in prison for armed robbery? Edit. For more info, a guy was saying he was shopping at a major grocery store chain and slipped in some water on the ground in front of a freezer. Guy has cell phone video his wife made of him in the water and we could hear her saying that the water wasn't showing up on video and to splash it with his hand so it would look better in the video. It also came out that he'd had 3 prior convictions for crimes of dishonesty. That may not be the exact term, but something similar, for things like shoplifting and other petty crimes. Second, edit. For more info, while I'm on my lunch break, the guy was representing himself pro se. The defense counsel asked him if his inability to work could be from the 2 previous knee injuries he'd had. When asked how they knew about those injuries, he was told his previous lawyer had given the defense's medical records upon request. Guy wanted to enter his MRIs as evidence, but had no one there as an expert witness to explain to the jury what they showed. He wanted to show us what the results were. UK, not a lawyer as such, but a planning consultant. The client signed sworn affidavit stating he'd been running a truck park business for over 10 years on a piece of land. After 10 years the use becomes immune from legal action. The counsel checked Google Maps and saw immediately he lied, had only ran the business for 7 years. He had committed a criminal offense by submitting a false sworn affidavit. Plonker. A defendant was written a cell phone ticket while driving and defended himself. Your Honor, I was not using a smartphone while driving. I was actually using a flip phone. Guilty. Unfair dismissal case. The client claimed to have been dismissed without reason or following procedure. After we had started the case, it comes out that not only was he given 3 written warnings, but he was also called in for a disciplinary hearing before his dismissal. Don't lie to your lawyer. It was a typical appointment/interview with the immigration committee in order to grant my client a residence permit. He was marrying a woman in my country with my country's nationality, and this is a legitimate reason to be granted a residence permit. So it was a typical procedure. At least that's what I thought. The committee is bored to death and we all want to be over with it. So they asked him all typical and boring questions, like how did they meet, where they live, etc. They ask these things to identify white/false marriages. At some point, they ask him if he was married before, and he says yes, back in my home country and I'm still married actually, never got a divorce. WTF. I was stunned. Double marriage is forbidden in my country. And he never bothered to mention this detail to me, neither to the other lawyer, when we asked him. He later told me he said the truth, because he was afraid to lie in front of a committee. An honest and stupid man. I got all my money though, yet we had to find another way to gain a residence permit. Thank you for watching. Tell me which one was your favorite. Like, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more. The next video will be even more interesting. You are a legend.